This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Ed, there's a lot to digest here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Well, thank you, Roger. And I recall very vividly in the midst of one of the times they were persecuting you, that you and I and your lovely wife and my family went down to Mass in Washington, D.C., and then my sons still talk about it. It was a great chance for them to meet you. But a point of personal privilege, Roger, I have to tell you, this week I was thinking of you because I don't know if you remember this story. I was offered a contract by CNN, and the first thing I did after I asked my wife what she thought is I called Roger Stone, and I said, Roger, what do you think I should do? Should I take it at CNN? And he said, of course, take it and plan on your firing. And it went exactly as you said. I took it. I lasted about 3 months, and then Anna Navarro and April Ryan and Simone Sanders went to management, kind of like what they did to Ronna McDaniel at MSNBC or NBC, and they said, we won't be on this station if you don't get rid of Martin. And I was fired. So there you go. You were right as usual, but it was one that I don't know if I reminded you that you were right on. So thank you for that, and thanks for the chance to talk about. You're exactly right. Whenever the Democrats accuse us, we the people, of doing something, it's them that are doing it. And so they're talking about threat to democracy. We now have a trail from 2020 in the summer all the way down to last month, February 2024, of conduct by Democrats at the highest levels to undermine our Constitution, to subvert democracy. And they're doing it right in the faces of the country. And thankfully, some people are really pushing now to get to the bottom of it. But it's an extraordinary tale of a coup on America that's being executed, and it continues to be done today. A color revolution led against we the people in America right now.
Let me just say a quick word about your CNN experience, because I found this kind of amusing. So, look, I'm not a great fan of Ronna Romney McDaniel, not at all.
Right.
But when she joined MSNBC and NBC, Chuck Todd, who frankly I think belongs behind the counter at Macy's rather than as the host of Meet the Press, let's just say Tim Russert, he is not. He went out and had a literal on-air meltdown fit. Now, when MSNBC hired Jen Psaki, I don't remember him complaining. He's supposed to be an unbiased, neutral journalist. So when these networks hire high-profile Democrats, the revolving door, coming out of the White House and going right over to MSNBC, Chuckles Todd had no problem whatsoever with that, but he has a problem with a putative Republican joining the network. I think you call that hypocrisy. Okay. Had to get that off my chest.
Right. No, you're exactly right, and I agree. But back to the hypocrisy of what's going on. Started, as I mentioned, we now know August of 2020 all the way through today. This Democrat plot, and conduct against us in this country.
So outline for us, if you would, what they're working on and what they have planned. What's interesting to me is that during the so-called Russian collusion hoax, which we now know was a hoax, perhaps the greatest single dirty trick in American political history, certainly the greatest single abuse of power, where the Obama administration, including Joe Biden himself, and President Barack Obama, National Security Director Susan Rice, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, used what they absolutely knew was falsified evidence, the so-called Steele dossier, which was a report that claimed falsely that Donald Trump had cavorted with prostitutes in Moscow when he was a private citizen and actually watched them urinate on a bed that in a hotel where Barack Obama had once stayed. The whole thing turned out to be fiction, and they knew it, but they used it to justify FISA warrants and spying on Trump's campaign. They used it to justify the appointment of a special counsel, but it was all secretive. It was all behind the scenes. What we're seeing here, what you're going to outline for us today, these folks are doing it right out in the open. The arrogance of it is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and they're bragging about it, right? And so let me draw a through line here. Right after President Trump takes office in 2017, one of the senior Obama Department of Defense officials, her name is Rosa Brooks, she leaves office and she writes a column. And the column says, we got to stop Trump. We got to do it by this and that. And by the way, if none of that works, we should do a military coup. She writes it. And I think it was Newsweek or one of these things. And then she goes off to Georgetown, where she still sits today as a dean of Georgetown Law School, a school that gets hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government and gets 501c3 status. She sits there and she's running this web of conduct. So in 2020, there's something called the Transition Integrity Project, where they war game what to do at the 2020 election. And they talk about all the things that could happen. It's like a lesson in the CIA's Color Revolution course on what we did in other countries. And they're talking, and they even use words like, as they get to, they may have to have alternate electors. They use the word agent provocateurs, which is clearly something that happened on January 6th. Now that we see more of what's coming out. And again, there, as you point out, John Podesta's on there, David Frum is on there. It's the coalition of anti-Trumpers, and they're public. They do interviews about it. There's retired military guys who are getting their pension and their military benefits who are out doing this thing, and it looks a lot like a real attempted coup. We haven't uncovered all of it, but we do know that Molly Ball's famous piece that she wrote, where they talk about fortifying the election, the Democrats were using every tool. They say they didn't break the law, but they certainly broke every ethical and moral norm and constitutional expectation. But that's all interesting, Roger. It's hard to look backwards in politics. If you're looking back too long, you're not looking at the train that's coming at you. But last month in February, they're bragging about, there's a general that's bragging about that they're wargaming how to stop the takeover, the commander-in-chief, a civilian commander-in-chief, stop the constitutional accurate takeover of a new leader by if needed, changing the Constitution to make sure that the military can control itself, not be controlled by President Trump, a new President Trump. So we're watching this through line, and it's all, again, Georgetown University, Dean Rosa Brooks, a woman named Mary McCord, who was in the middle of the Russia debacle. She's at the Department of Justice. And so what we have now, thankfully, guys like Taibbi, McCabe, DeRoy Murdoch journalists have been digging into it, and now the Congress is paying attention. So we've got to get to the bottom of it, not because it's scummy behavior, but because they've shown that they can actually succeed at stopping Trump, and we've got to be fighting back.
Yeah, earlier in the show, I outlined what I think is this effort to try to tip control of the House of Representatives to the Democrats by inducing enough Republicans to throw in the towel and vacate their seats, creating enough votes for Hakeem Jeffries to become Speaker, where they will quickly pass legislation barring Donald Trump from the ballot. I think that would get rubber stamped over in the Senate, 51-49. And for our friends out there who are listening, say, well, surely the courts will never allow that. Actually, as you know, Ed, the Supreme Court invited that in their Colorado ballot access decision. They specifically said only the Congress would have the power to bar an individual from the ballot. What you're talking about, I think, is a secondary danger, but just as insidious. The centerpiece of this seems to be legislation by Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. You remember him, the great Vietnam War veteran.
Right, exactly.
Shout out to all my fellow Connecticut natives out there. He's actually sponsored legislation that would, in essence, remove the president's control of the military. In other words, remove civilian control of the military and put it in the hands of the military themselves. I can't think of anything that is more anti-American.
Well, and look, again, we see now, looking back a little bit, General Milley is bragging about the fact that he was resisting the Constitution. And, again, and deciding that he was above the Constitution and all these. But what I'm pointing to, Roger, you've taught so many of us over the years. You've got to find where the enemy is, and you've got to isolate and attack what they're doing. Georgetown University School of Law is a center of this right now. It's just a few blocks from the Capitol. It's got, you mentioned a revolving door. It's got a revolving door of people who come out of the Obama, especially Obama administration, and now to some extent Biden administration. It's where Podesta hung his hat for a while, John Podesta, and on and on and on. And exactly, there's a series of efforts, one on the military control, other ones on aspects of any kind of handoff. And, of course, as you point out, the lawfare is aimed at people, like they've done to you for a decade now, like they're doing to President Trump. Use the law against individuals anywhere you can, whether it's now Jeff Barr or John Eastman. So what we're talking about, and I've been working on it for a month and a half now, is trying to get people to see what's happening so we can demand some changes. And one of them should be, by the way, just like when Elise Stefanik put those Ivy League presidents on the hot seat, Georgetown University ought to answer some questions now. I mean, you can run stupid professors saying dumb things. That's America. It's the First Amendment. I'm all for that. You cannot run operatives with a Secret Service, with top secret clearance and military guys. There's retired military in there talking about this. You can't run that and think you get tax dollars and benefits from the government. By the way, Congressman Pete Sessions, 5 days ago, sent a letter over to Georgetown saying, stop the shredder, save the documents, because we want to look at what the heck you were doing. And so, I'm not a huge fan of these oversight things because they don't usually yield much. On the other hand, we need a death by 1,000 cuts. If we've learned anything from the left, you've got to take every shot you can and keep moving. And I really think Georgetown University has to answer for what they're doing, because to me, it's treasonous. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not saying I see all the elements to try somebody and put them to death, but I'm seeing conduct that is far beyond what is a university's having interesting conversations about possibilities.
So the one person who seems to be the common thread here, up to her knees in the Russian collusion hoax, up to her knees in impeachment number 1, based on the non-Russian collusion that didn't exist, up to her knees in impeachment number 2, the Ukrainian phone call, which, as President Trump says, was perfect. We actually now know that impeachment was actually designed to cover up Joe Biden's own misconduct regarding himself and his son pertaining to Ukraine. Also involved in the January 6th controversy is this woman, Mary McCord, who's, I guess, back at Georgetown. Tell us about Mary McCord.
Well, I'll tell you a story that will illustrate this. I was actually with a guy who's a defense lawyer. He's done a lot of different work, and I only just met him. And we're talking with somebody else in the conversation, and he says, the problem with the FBI is the FBI used to be, if you were carrying a gun as an FBI agent, you had to talk to a prosecutor, and you had to work a case together. You couldn't just be off. What happened with guys like Strzok, Peter Strzok, and all these people is they went into this counterintelligence where they didn't have to talk to anybody. And Mary McCord at the Department of Justice was the head of the counterintelligence, the national security desk there. And so she had total control to do things like say, hey, wow, look at this. We think we're worried about X or Y. Go ask the Five Eyes, the other nations, to bump these guys, they call it. And unsolicited, this guy who I'd never met said, the woman who is the worst at this is Mary McCord. She's totally undermining the Department of Justice and the whole system of government the way it's supposed to be. So she was at the Department of Justice. She's been at the center, as you point out, of all of the abuses you can think of. The FISA overuse, the use of government without any kind of accountability, and very, very, very politically, aimed. She's not just a liberal. She's a card-carrying Democrat who's going after everybody. And as you point out, she cycles out of government and goes where? Georgetown Law, to a special institute, peopled with another 6 lawyers that are just the same as her, hacks from the left and the Democrats, and they're in there doing war gaming over how to take over the government. And nobody in the Georgetown law is saying, hey, this is a little different than when we have, some egghead who got his PhD at Oxford who's talking about, what would it be like if the Roman Empire restarted? These are people who know how to use the power to impact things. And, of course, she's quoted in NBC News delivering the message of the regime all the time now. And so we can see hand in glove it's working together. And as I said, just February, a month ago, they had one of these war games with with retired military, with all these different entities on a Zoom call, which means it's recorded somewhere, and we should get it. We should get the video and see how they were game planning to stop the peaceful transition of government. That's what their stated goal is. We hate Trump so much, we must subvert the Constitution and do this. So Mary McCord has a lot to answer for her previous conduct. I agree. But right now, she's in the middle of leading what it looks to me like a coup against our nation. If we can stop it, it'll be the dog that didn't bark. But right now, the dog's barking, and we better listen.
Yeah, I was shocked to hear those revelations that John Brennan, the CIA director, with no probable cause, and in order to maintain his own plausible deniability, went to the intelligence agencies of the 5 English-speaking nations, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, to ask them to begin to surveil 26 associates of Donald Trump, of whom I was one. I woke up on Inauguration Day, which would have been January 2017, to read an above-the-fold story in the New York Times saying that I was one of 3 Trump associates who was under government surveillance. It actually used the word wiretapped, who was wiretapped because of my connections to Russia, of which I had and have none. To this day, by the way, the government denies that, but the New York Times refuses to retract it because they say they have 3 impeccable sources. Pardon me, but this appears to be deja vu all over again.
Well, and deja vu, or they're running this. Yes, they're running the same play, and they know how to run it. And what you just revealed, what you just talked about, has been revealed, is what we know. Lord knows what we don't know. In other words, how many things did they engineer? And remember, when I tell you, Roger, your listeners will get it, but I tell you, hey, are you surprised that when America says to the other Five Eyes, the other big nations, Britain and Australia, hey, I need your help like this, they say we'll help? Of course they do, because they need America. Just like, by the way, when the Ukraine is told, Zelensky's told, and those guys are told, we're going to run it like this. This is how they run it. I mean, you don't have to wonder now how you see the power politics. But back to Mary McCord. At the center of this, they're going to run. It's like when they try to run on race. There's no more racist party in the history of the country than the Democrat Party. Down to today. Watch Charles Barkley, for God's sakes, on CNN admit the Democrats only talk about black people at election time. They don't care for them. So they're the racist party, and they say everyone else is racist. Now they're going to say they're for protecting democracy when all of them at the top level, including Biden, are spending their time subverting democracy in front of us. And the only good news is we can see it and we can say it, and we've got to fight back against it. But we also better be aware that they're not playing for small stakes, right? This is the free world, control of the greatest nation in the world, and they're playing at a high level. We better be aware of what they're doing, because it's not slowing. They're not caught and therefore this Easter season we're repentant. No, they're not repentant. They're bolder than ever.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show, and I am interviewing Ed Martin, the host of the Pro America Report on the Salem Radio Network, and we'll be right back.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is Roger Stone, and we're back. We're talking to Ed Martin, who is the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles and Eagles Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund. He's an old friend of mine, going back to the days of one of our greatest presidents, Ronald Reagan. Ed served as chairman of the Missouri Republican Party as well as the Republican National Committee man for Missouri. He is the co-author of a 2016 New York Times best-selling book, The Conservative Case for Trump, and he currently hosts the Pro-America Report on the Salem Radio Network. We're glad to have you. Ed, let's get into some politics. Given everything that they have thrown at him, given the domination of Trump derangement syndrome in the national mainstream media, how do you think President Donald Trump is doing?
Well, I can only assess it, Roger, from where people I know. And, I grew up not far. I listened to WABC growing up. I grew up in New Jersey City, and then I spent 25 years in Missouri. And I think of those two populations, New Jersey and Missouri, especially St. Louis, that's very sort of pre-Trumpian America first. And people are just running through fire that supported the president. You can't keep them from voting. Now, that's important when you're running for office. And the late Phyllis Schlafly used to say one of the most important things she ever did was run for Congress and lose, because you learn how campaigns work. And I ran, as you mentioned, and I lost. You know how they work. Turn out, you got to turn your people out. If they're fired up, that makes it easier, right? So I think the president's got unbelievably strong turnout from Republicans, all Republicans, even the ones that may say they don't really like him. They're there. The question, I think, is a bigger one, and I think it's happening, is more and more Americans see that they're bullied. The word I use is bullied. They're bullied by the government, and they're seeing Trump, who's a billionaire, who's got the pretty wife, and he's got the great life. He's got the great friends. He's been successful, and they're bullying him. And more Americans are looking up and they're saying, "But I can't stand this." And I think black men are reacting to that. I think lots of other folks are reacting. I think a lot of women, they're liberal white women, will hate Trump because they're mentally ill. But the real normal women are looking at it going, "This isn't how it's supposed to work." So I think it's going fine. But as you know, Roger, it comes down to 6 or 7 states. And the RNC takeover is important because you got to get on the ground. And you don't just got to get on the ground with Scott Presler, who I love, registering voters. You got to get on the ground with people that know how to fight. Lawyers, operatives who know where the game is played hard in Montgomery County, in Maricopa County. And so I'm optimistic, but, a lot of times the biggest fear I have is people start feeling good. And they're like, "Oh, we're on the right trend line. We got everything happening." No, you got to grind. It's a grind, and the grind is harder than ever.
I read this terrific report from the National Republican Assembly the other day. They have developed a proprietary and perfectly legal program in which you can run a state's entire voter database through their program and find bad addresses. And they're finding hundreds and hundreds of thousands of bad addresses. People registered to empty lots, people registered to buildings that don't exist. They then take them to the boards of elections, and in many, many states, they're getting cooperation. And these non-existent people living at non-existent addresses are being removed from the rolls. People don't see that happening, but I can assure you it's happening. We're going to have a report on it next weekend here at the Roger Stone Show, because it's extraordinarily impressive, and it proves what one individual can do, or a handful of individuals working together can do. Money continues to be an enormous problem for the Trump campaign. The president's efforts are being drained by this tsunami of lawfare. The Democrats, being incumbents, have raised record sums of money. I think that gap has to be closed. I think it was California Speaker Jess Unruh who said money is the mother's milk of politics. Can Trump close this gap with small and medium-sized contributions?
Yes, and I worry, right? Yes, finally having control of the RNC makes people that believe in Trump think, yes, they won't be wasted by Rana and others and consultants. So I think you'll see something there. But I think that, it's a real challenge. And at the highest level, as you mentioned, the big donors, that's where I hate to say it. One of the things about it, talk of Trump winning makes donors say, oh, boy, I better get on board. So I look, if anybody can do that, it's Trump. He's shown that he can do it. And look, if you're Biden, you better have twice as much money than Trump because you need it to try to mask over what's going on. But we watched, a few days ago, there was Obama and Clinton raising money for Biden. Again, if you feel good about the fact that the country's going to hell and we got a guy that can save it, Trump, you better realize the country's going to hell and they don't mind taking it to hell, and they're not gonna let us get back in office easily. So it's going to be a dogfight. And I hadn't given money to Trump in probably a year. And actually, after the primary was over, I went online and I gave some more money to him. And I'm not a big donor type, but I think people have to change their mindset in terms of realizing, hey, whatever the heck the fight is, Trump's got to fight lawsuits and everything else. He needs our support, and that is money. Money is you need votes and money. If you don't have money to get the votes, it's not going to work. So I'm with you on that.
All right. I think we're out of time for this segment. I want to thank Ed Martin, a longtime friend of mine who does a great pro-America show on the Salem Radio Network, for joining us here on the Roger Stone Show. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Roger. It's always a pleasure.